bands of the wicked have robbed me, but I have not forgotten thy law. At midnight will I rise to give thanks unto thee because of thy righteous judgments, O Lord. I am a companion of all them that fear thee, and of them that keep thy precepts. The earth, O Lord, is full of thy mercy. Teach me thy statutes. Thou hast dealt well with thy servants, O Lord, according to thy word. Teach me good judgment and knowledge, for I have believed thy...
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. That's strange. Does this help? Well, that does help. Okay. Continuing in Psalms 36 today. The Psalm 36 opens up with "To the chief musician," which I've said on a number of occasions. That's an example of the translators not knowing exactly how to split these up, or maybe having the wrong idea, we could say, because it's quite possible this is how it belongs. And I've talked about that based on Habakkuk, the final chapter of Habakkuk, where the psalm, where that is, it has the form of a psalm, and it has a postscript. At the end it says, "To the chief singer on my stringed instruments." Yeah. And so this is probably a more likely configuration. It's not incredibly important since it is a postscript or a title, depending on your point of view. I don't know that's a hotly contested issue, but in most translations the error is perpetuated. And I do think it is an error. A Psalm of David, the servant of the Lord. The transgression of the wicked saith within my heart, that there is no fear of God before his eyes. For he flattereth himself with his own eyes, until his iniquity be found to be hateful. The words of his mouth are iniquity and deceit. He hath left off to be wise and to do good. He deviseth mischief upon his bed. He setteth himself in a way that is not good. He abhorreth not evil. Abhorreth not evil. And it talks about that. So there's some we're going to have the wicked contrasted with the Lord. Now, it's kind of an interesting way of saying this. The transgression of the wicked saith within my heart. What does that mean? How does their wickedness say in your heart? Well, I think the idea is you observe their wickedness. And it speaks in your heart, meaning that it sends a message, Like you see the behavior of some people and you look at them and you say, hey, there's no fear of God. Like when they're looking at the world and at their actions, the fear of God is not in the calculation. Because they don't know the fear of God. They don't have the fear of God. I was talking about this the other day. In our world today, there are many people who do not know the fear of God. I mean, there's always lots of people who don't know the fear of God. Even some people who say they believe in God do not properly fear him. And, and I'll tell you what, certainly, I certainly think my fear of God could be a more perfect fear. Or more perfect, I said there's an important fear. People will talk about fear only in the negative, right? But we know that it talks about the fear of God. So well, that means reverence, and no, it's the same word. It does have a different meaning though, because all words have different meanings, or many words have different meanings in different contexts. Just like jealousy can be characterized as the envy that makes one hate his neighbor due to perception of greater success or attainment on the part of your neighbor. And that's the kind of envy that is sinful. But I do not think the envy that, or the jealousy, whichever one you want to choose, that drives one to, say, defend God's word against attack. You might say, well, that's not the same thing. It is. The same zeal, the same heat and passion that people derive for wickedness can also be channeled to the right thing. You know, we can be passionate about defending God's word there and be jealous over it, meaning to protect it, to keep it from just generically say destruction, you know, from people doing it harm or mischaracterizing it in some way. I've been very jealous over the Lord. You know, for the Lord's sake, I've been jealous. It means zealous, but it also has the idea, but it's the same root idea, because they'll use the same word and translate it envy other places, especially in the New Testament. You know, here it doesn't actually say envy, but I'm just saying the same thing with envy as like with fear. You know, the book of Revelation says, the fearful and the unbelieving and the abominable and murderers and fornicators and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part which is in the lake which shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. You know, like fearful. First thing mentioned, not right there, the fearful. But on the other hand, we are expected, and you know, it would be a strange thing if there was no fear of God. If we did not fear God. Because God is to be feared. What God doesn't like is us being afraid of other stuff when we ought to be trusting Him. You know? He wants, you know, because when we fear other things, you know, it betrays a sort of lack of trust on our part. We don't trust the Lord fully, so we fear things. You know, because, you know, and on, you know, hey, let me, speaking for myself, you know, sometimes I don't, you know, like I could almost characterize my thoughts in the same way as being like, I know God intends good for me, but sometimes I'm afraid of what that means. You know what I mean? Like it's you know, the ultimate good for me. You know, what if my ultimate good is to serve God in some capacity that includes my death? You know what I mean? Or that includes suffering. It very well may. It's very, you know, life always entails a little suffering for most people. Even people who have everything somehow end up finding a way to suffer, you know? It's amazing, you know, all these rich people, celebrities and stuff, and you always, and their lives are as big a mess as anybody else's. Because while wealth can solve many problems, it does not solve many of the critical issues of the human condition. You know what I mean? Like it can't solve loneliness. You can have a lot of people around you. But someone very close to me, you know, would tell me about how in their early life they were extremely lonely, yet they were surrounded by people all the time. You know, they never had a shortage of people around them, friends, but felt just cripplingly lonely because they didn't have any real human connection. Because it takes more than what most relationships consist of to really have a fulfilling human relationship and connection. Most relationships are essentially friendly acquaintances, you know, and a lot of times to maintain friendly acquaintance, people keep themselves, you know, they keep their lives with their friends, and they're also themselves with their friends as like a different person almost than their inner self. And so, I mean, I'm getting far afield here, but you know, part of that can explain why no amount of money can cure that. You know, no amount of money can cure that. You know, and no lack of money can stop you from fulfilling it. You know, and when, I mean, if you really are so minded, meaning you don't need money to fulfill that. I'm not saying like you can have it if you don't have money. No, you can't have it if you don't have money any more than you can have it if you do have money. The point is, Money is completely independent from attaining certain things. You just can't, money can't buy you, they say money can't buy you love. It can buy you a certain kind of love, though. It can buy you a certain kind of friend. It can buy you certain kinds of relationships, but the relationships most critical to the human enrichment. Meaning a relationship that's going to enrich you and not just either suck from you or you're going to suck from them or whatever. That's not quite, I don't know, truly intimate. Anyways, to fear God is so important because He is the only thing we ought to fear. And it is important also because it is a fountain of right knowledge about how one ought to be in the world. Because you're by putting your faith in the Lord, you're living now in a world with a creator. At least in your mental space you are. I mean, you are literally too, but because God hides himself, you can choose rather to believe that God doesn't exist and live your life completely void of thoughts. At least you can attempt to do this, void of thoughts of any sense that you have to give an account to God. And for some people that's very freeing because they feel that now they can do anything. And it's true that it becomes that there's no evil that is truly impossible to you. Anything that would have been considered evil under God is not impossible for you. I mean, if you want to kill somebody, as long as you can get away with it, there's no, you could come up with reasons why you shouldn't. So many rational reasons why you shouldn't, because there are many murderers have thought I can get away with it. And that's why they do it. But many have not. I mean, there's no guarantee you didn't get away with it. But the point is you can be freed to do things you wouldn't normally do. Certainly you can explore perversity, without a sense of responsibility to God. But, those are just the tip of the iceberg, the kind of the obvious things people often, reject God, and it's in the pursuit of a hedonistic, which by that I mean, self-pleasure seeking lifestyle, where their own pleasure becomes the highest important human need. And they'll pursue that pleasure, though the way they go about it, like I said, rarely brings about the kind of fulfillment that one would gain from building genuine relationships and also fulfilling the basic human functions of, like, I think the most fulfilling thing for a person to do is to know God, right? But then in the world, there also are things like family, and that can take a lot of shapes. You don't necessarily have to take the shape of, I got my wife, I got my kids. But I mean, it can be like, I have my nieces and nephews, I have my cousins. I mean, you can have a close family without actually bearing children. But having some sort of close family relationship is an important and fulfilling part of human existence. And that's why a lot of rich people, because their family life is terrible, not necessarily just like the nuclear aspect of that. I mean, a lot of times it's just extended family. An extended family is just a bunch of nuclear families all strung together anyway, so you can have fulfilling relationships outside of the, let's say, the most basic family unit, which is husband and wife. I mean, you can be, because you're already the product of that. So I don't want to leave anybody out on that, but it's part of what makes life fulfilling is family life in one form or the other. People need to be connected. And fear. How do I keep getting on that? Why do I keep getting drawn over to that? Oh, whatever. Okay. So, you observe people's behavior, and it's obvious they don't fear God because of the things they do. Or at least that's what it's saying. Maybe it's not true even, right? But it says in your heart, like you watch some guy, Christian or no, and they behave a certain way, you think he's not a Christian. He doesn't know the fear of God. And you may be shocked if you go up and you talk to him and then you find out, oh, he is a Christian. He's just behaving very badly. That happens too. But it should not be, especially when it's transgression. It's not just the sin. It's transgression, which implies some sort of offense. You've transgressed. Yeah, I mean, you've crossed a boundary. Egress is the way out, right? Transgress is to cross. Egress. Now I feel like I gotta look up that word in Hebrew. Just because I'm like, oh. If I get too specific about what it means, I feel like I owe it. So let's take a look real quick here. Oops, sorry. Transition like a pro. No fear of God before their eyes. They even decided to label this thing that. The transgression. Pesha. Which the quick definition said was transgression. It just pops up there, but you guys don't get to see it. Though one time, for a while, they were seeing it, and I don't know what happened. From Pasha. That was the name of one of my parakeets, which meant, it was, it meant wicked one, actually. I named my birds after demons and such. From Pasha, a revolt, national, moral, or religious. Rebellion. Yeah, it means a revolt against, lawful authority, against the nation, against moral standards of the society, or explicitly against religion. Transgression. So this isn't garden variety sin we're talking about. We're talking about transgression as serious committing of sin. When you see serious sin, it does cause you to think that can't be a believer. But oftentimes, it is a case of nominalness or of youth. When I was young, I believed in God. I was passionate about Christ on a certain level. I mean, like, if someone started insulting Jesus, I'd punch him in the face. I'm just kidding. But, I mean, I would be inclined to punch them in the face. You know what I mean? I'd be inclined to defend. I'd be inclined to argue, for God against those who disbelieve. That would be my automatic stance as a young person. But I was a very sinful person. You could even say transgressive, certainly in a moral sense. I was morally transgressive and somewhat, I took somewhat, not just, I don't want to say delight, but I took a certain amount of, pride, thought that I can drink you under the table. Like, like that kind of pride, the silly pride of drunks, about how much they can consume and still stand on their feet. Yeah. You can put everyone under the table. It's quite a skill you've got there. So, observation. Actually, really quick, I want to go back to the, I just want to see, just what other translations have here. So, let's skip the NIV. Let's try, where's the RSV? There's the RSV? Let's just look at the New King James Version. Let's see. An oracle within my heart concerning the transgression of the wicked. There is no fear of God before his eyes. So again, it says an oracle is like the idea that it speaks within my heart, meaning the transgression itself becomes like this speaking thing. Because an oracle would be a place, like some place or someone or something through whom or through which God would speak. Right? Meaning it was I don't want to say an avatar, but kind of like that, like some sort of earthly representation that speaks for God. Like the Bible is the oracles of God. The Greeks had oracles. You'd go to the priestesses and they would tell you the will of God, of whatever God they were priestess of. And so the oracles like that. And so this is also an oracle like within his heart. And I think that's a fine translation, though that makes me want to go back and say like, okay, well, it saith within my heart, saith, I'm just looking, it's like, oh, the word saith is utterance, noom. My heart, mind, will. It's still basically saying the wicked uttereth, the transgression utters in my heart. Their transgression is like this thing. Like imagine you watch. You ever seen something really wicked? Like one time I was traveling home with my wife and kids from Thanksgiving, and on the side of the road I saw what looked like a woman being kidnapped. And not by strangers, but by associates. It looked like they all looked very Italian. And she looked very well dressed, like not like a prostitute or something, but like maybe like a really expensive one. I don't know. Maybe it was like somebody's sister-in-law. It was out of hand, but in the area it was when it happened. This really rich, sort of gangster-infested area of the suburbs. The kind of place where the gangsters put their mansions, you know. I mean, the old times. I don't know. It was very interesting, but I saw this. You know, it's like, and it always has been in my heart a speaking thing, so to speak. Meaning, I learned from it. I saw it. It was remarkable. It burned into my mind when I saw that happen. Yeah, I pursued it. You know, just in case you're wondering. You know, I called the police. I even turned around, went back for the license plates. When we saw it, we drove by, and I was like, what the heck? And so I turned around. As I was gone, she was already in one of the other cars, and their license plates were all dark. And there was like a bunch of people. I forgot how many guys were. I don't know why. I think I confused the number. I forget now. It's been so long. There was like 4 guys. Yeah, one of them was doing the talking. Anyways, I went back. Get the license plate. The license plates, like the bulb and their license plate thing was out for some reason. So the license plates were too dark to read. Though I did get her license plate, reported it to the police, followed up with it, never heard anything about it. So I asked around and I just gave up after a while. I'm like, apparently, you know, they got the information. The license plate was reported. So, you know, there's a link. No one ever called me up like, would you, you know, like I said, I don't know if it was a murder, but it looked like something, you know? Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. But anyways, at the time, it troubled me. And it still troubles me in my heart, you know, if I think about it. I mean, not like trouble, I just mean like I've seen something troubling, you know. Not that I'm like laying awake at night thinking about it. I don't. Though I might have that night, you know. And so certain events, you observe things like, you know, I think about this. I probably mentioned that, you know, I've mentioned this story that someone very close to me tells of a pastor or someone who was studying to be a pastor. And they started asking them more and more questions. The person I know, they started asking them questions about the Bible, Christianity, you know, God. And the response at some point was, you know, why don't take it so seriously, it's just religion. And then he realized, whoops, I said that, that's the quiet part. I'm not supposed to say that out loud. You know? But he, I suppose, became impatient or frustrated with the questioning and exposed the fact that this young man who was enlisted and studying to become a pastor like his father was not sincerely a believer. You know what I mean? Or let me put it this way, that kind of commentary, you'd be excused if you began to suspect they were not a believer, or that there was some sort of deficit in their fear of God, that they should say such a thing. Because here's the thing. If you fear God, even if you believe that, you wouldn't say it. Because, like, I fear God. And you probably wouldn't even believe it either, because it's not really compatible. Because you'd know that God ought to be feared. And he ought to be understood. To whatever degree that God has revealed himself to us, we ought to try to understand him, because this has been revealed. And it's an opportunity for us to get to know God on some level. And to make contact. By knowing somewhat of God, we can reach to him, and he can reveal more of himself to us. Because he's given us the gospel. We know we can call on him in the name of Jesus. And we can at least begin to have that relationship with him. But so many people are not fearing God. And then you get people like this who are going to be in charge of other people's, religious experience, or whatever you want to call it. Their religious lives are going to be in this person's hands. And they quite possibly don't even really believe. Or they certainly believe some things about religion that are incompatible with someone sincerely leading people in their faith. It's not good enough just to have someone who's trained to go through the motions and say all the right things that the denomination says they ought to say. And it's not acceptable. It shouldn't be acceptable, but, because they're so rarely really questioned or put to the test like that, you rarely would get an admission like that, because you don't have to, because people give them way too much respect. Men of God are way too often held in higher reverence than they ever have coming. For he flattereth himself in his own eyes until his iniquity be found to be hateful. See, the wicked, they flatter themselves, right? So that they can't become aware of their transgression. So the transgression gets worse and worse. If you have a certain amount of self-awareness, it helps keep the iniquity down. You know what I mean? Like if someone is ashamed properly of their sin, let's say someone has a masturbation problem. Well, they don't do it in front of Walmart. And if men, so there's a certain moral level that goes beyond what men will allow, that includes things men will, well, there's a certain amount of transgression that includes things men will allow. You know what I mean? And that's what everyone's trying to push the boundaries on, is what men will allow, because they have no fear of God. And if they can just get away with it in front of men, they feel that that is sufficient. If we can just get away with it in the realms of men, that's all that matters. If I can be a fake pastor, that's all that matters. If I can, engage in this, a particular, my own particular brand of sexual immorality and impurity that, was found to be beyond the limit in the past, well, if I can get people to just let me do it, then I can do it. Because I don't fear God. And so they soothe their own conscience and harden their hearts against the righteousness of God, and and their iniquity increases. Like I said, the man who was saying it's just religion when he was young is not necessarily, maybe that individual had a change of heart along the way. But more likely is getting away with it hardened their hearts. And they flatter themselves like, look, I can, and once you get away with saying something like that, they start thinking, I can say anything. Until all of a sudden they become just this grotesque caricature of what they thought they were going to be. They become like this grotesque, transgressive version of themselves. And it begins to spill out. And so his iniquity is found to be hateful, because a lot of times, like my iniquity, people don't really care. You know, for the most part, people are like, oh, you got some anger issues, or you got some fear issues, or you got some other, emotional, psychological sins where it's like, oh, your faith is not complete, your faith is not as strong as it ought to be, your knowledge is imperfect, or whatever. The realms of those things, not very important. Nobody cares, But, if I get up here and I'm really misleading people, you know what I mean? Flattering myself, telling myself I'm doing a good job. And some people would say, well, that's exactly what you do, Paul. You sit up there, you mislead people, and you flatter yourself, tell yourself you do a good job. I wouldn't say that. I just say I do the job I do. You know what I mean? I don't know if it's good or bad. It just is what it is. I mean, I presume it to be good, of course. But what I mean good or bad, not morally, but in effectualness. It's like, I don't know if it's probably good for some people. For other people, it may be too much. I never get offended if people don't listen to the study, because it's like an hour every, I talk for a long time about these things, and also sometimes get afield a bit and off the topic, and that can be boring, especially if you're not particularly interested in the subject. If you don't have a deep interest and abiding interest in a thing, it is hard. I remember, when I was young, trying to read certain parts of the Bible, and I wasn't interested in Leviticus and Numbers, and it was hard to read them because a lot of the stuff, a lot of what it was genealogy or sacrificial stuff or laws, and also I just didn't have the mind of understanding. I think I could understand. I would enjoy reading the law more now, and I have in recent years enjoyed it more because I have a different and broader perspective on it. Where as opposed to having the perspective of someone in their youth learning about the Bible for the first time. When you have things like Revelation and the Kings and the Gospels, it's hard to turn to something like the law as an interesting read. But whatever, that's off the track. But the point is, like, if I'm a bad teacher, that can compound and I keep telling myself I'm doing a great job, but my iniquity just becomes eventually hateful. Meaning, if iniquity is allowed to pile up like that, if the transgression, it continues and over again, and it keeps going because I don't fear God, and I flatter myself in my heart, or I flatter myself in my own eyes, meaning my judgment. I look at myself and I don't see a transgression. You may see one, but I keep myself head and shoulders above all the criticisms of the world. I keep myself above it until I become so transgressive that I'm hateful to people. The words of his mouth are iniquity and deceit. He hath left off to be wise and to do good. You get so embroiled in iniquity, lies. I forgot who said it, but I think it was Mark Twain, maybe, or whatever. But the nice thing about telling the truth is you never have to remember what you said. Because when you start lying, you have to start remembering, like, what did I say, as opposed to what the truth is. The truth is generally, the truth. As far as remembering what you said, the words that came out of your mouth, that's a totally different issue. I have Bible studies all the time. I couldn't tell you what I said, but I do remember the truth. The truth I learned, I remember. The words I said, those are not so important, And that's the thing. The truth is, learning the truth is the most important thing, not having the exact formula of words. That's why I don't encourage things. I do encourage it on some level, like memorization. I encourage people to memorize the Bible. I'm trying to figure out recently. Let's see here. I have my stack of. Oh, there goes the microphone. Okay. Did I put it right here? Recently, I ran across something. I haven't seen it in a while. And actually, I think I lost. I don't know. I know where I put it because while it was interesting, it was still not that important to me anymore. Because I no longer... Wait, is this it? Nope. Nope. Did I just stick it back in here? I'm just wondering. Kind of like a trip down. There, how'd that... Oh yeah, here it is. Look at that. I like ran across this and I found my better glasses too. Oh, this is gonna be my... Oh, I can see so much better. See, when I was young, and this may seem off the track, but I've talked about this before, you know. This is like my, this is like my cheat sheet. It's got this is the list of all the kings of Judah and all the kings of Israel. It also gives the years of their reign and how many years they reigned. Like Rehoboam 17, Abijam 3, Asa 41, and I got the dates in here. Jehoshaphat 25, Jehoram, Ahaziah, Athaliah, Joash, Amaziah, Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, Manasseh. And then, what is this? This is the line of David from Adam and the number of years they lived. Adam, Seth, Enos, Canaan, etc. Jared, Enoch. Adam, Seth, Enos, Canaan, Mahaliel. Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, Shem, Arphaxad, Selah, Aber, Peleg, Ru, Surag. I remember those. And this is like the number of the books these are the books of the Bible. I made this up when I was like 21. This guy's Genesis 50, Exodus 40. It's really 40. I thought it was like 44. Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, Samuel, Kings, Chronicles. Well, actually, I usually say it like Samuel, Kings, Chronicles. Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, and then the prophets, and and I was trying to get knowledge, right? I'm trying to implant in my brain knowledge because that was a kind of knowledge. It is important basic knowledge of the Bible. I mean, it's like as a student, I wouldn't want to be like, is that a book of the Bible? You can also pick up that information from just long acquaintance with the scripture. At the time, I was trying to shortcut my way. I wanted to gain as much knowledge as quickly as possible. And that was one way I thought, I'll just cram my head with this information. But I've been, leading Bible studies for, over 25 years. And, there was never a point at which actually remembering the list of the names of the kings of Judah and Israel in their order or whether the years of their reign would have been significantly useful. There are times when I thought it could have been useful to remember where a king occurred in the succession or the years in which he reigned. That can be useful information. But I never thought of remembering it and then failed because I can't remember it. Because you have to, that kind of memorization, you have to kind of keep it up. I failed, and but it wasn't worth, because it's like there's any time I would have used that information, it would have just been trivia, essentially, because it is trivia. It's like these trivial parts of the story, like the order and stuff. It is significant, but it's like memorizing just those bare facts is not particularly useful. And it will have a very limited kind of use. It's a nice party trick. I can say, I can list the books of the Bible, and I can tell you how many chapters are in each of them. I can list the names of the kings of Israel and Judah. I can list the genealogy of Adam, of Noah, from Adam. I can rattle that off. Whoa, what a nice party trick. Give the man a prize. This is not particularly valuable. Why do I keep going off? I don't know. I think at the time it seems like it's pertinent, and it probably is on some level. There's a level of pertinence to these questions. Words of our mouth, iniquity. I don't want the words of my mouth to be iniquity and deceit. But when you start, well, I think I was talking about basically, you fill yourself up with, you build yourself up in your transgression, in your iniquity. You begin to think you aren't accountable to anybody. And when someone doesn't think they're accountable to anybody, meaning God, who would know if they're lying, I can lie in front of men and perhaps even conceal it, maybe forever. Some there are probably lies that went down to the grave without being exposed in this life. I've no doubt there are many lies that have gone down to the grave unexplained. The wicked weave a web of deceit. Their words are treachery. They're iniquity. It's wickedness. They're not wise in doing good, because wisdom teaches you to do good. Wisdom teaches you to do the upright thing, to speak the truth. In your relationships where people trust each other and speak the truth to each other are going to be closer and more fulfilling than ones built on lies and deceit. Because not only are you preventing that person from themselves getting closer to you, and you may even deceive them. Someone told me, like, when their husband lied to them, it was like, and at the time, it was like, oh, okay, everything's fine. They received the lie. But then when it was exposed, it was like the whole world was turned upside down, and they felt like suddenly like they didn't even know this person. Like there was an entirely secret life they were living. And it makes them think, well, what else is being withheld? What else is being mysteriously lied about and concealed from me? And it makes your spouse or your spouse, let's just leave it at that, significant other, it makes your spouse or other family member, like son, daughter, mother, father, it makes them feel, in the short term, it can make people feel closer to you, prevent anger. Lying is such a temptation because it enables you to sort of mortgage reality. You can, like you can kind of like put off accountability for something maybe forever by just deceiving people. And so it's tempting. Did you do this? From every child that discovers at some point, like, that lying can be a practical solution to some problems, as far as it can seem in the short term to work. And granted, for some people, lies, like I said, they take them to the grave with them, and they get away with it. But if we have the fear of God, we know that no man will get away with it. It says the fearful and unbelieving end up in the lake of fire. But the final thing it mentions is and all liars. All liars. That's why, I can safely say none of us is worthy of life everlasting, because God has already condemned all the liars, and that covers just about everybody. As far as everybody's lied at some point. Think, it was just a white lie. No, it wasn't white. I understand, like, people sometimes lie to their spouses because of their love to their spouse. They don't want to, and they don't want, and because it's an important relationship, they don't want to rock the boat. And they don't totally trust their spouse with the truth. They think, oh, if I tell them the truth, they're going to get upset. They're going to be angry with me. It's going to ruin the moment. But, with my children, I always try to make the truth as cheap as possible. Meaning I tried to make it so that telling the truth was easy. Like, I don't come in all angry and say, who did this? Because if I let them know, it's like I'm full of wrath. I need a confession from somebody. When I'm afraid to kid, when I know someone's done something, and I want a confession, I take an approach that I think lends itself to being told the truth. Because I'll even say, like, I need the truth about this. I'm not going to punish anybody, but I need to know what happened here. Because I do that often to get the truth to come out. because you can set up the table in such a way as to make it so costly for someone to tell the truth that they're afraid to tell the truth. You know, if it's like, oh, if you confess this, I'm leaving. You know, I mean, if that's the cost, it's very hard for someone to tell the truth in that case. It's like, well, I don't want you to go, so why would I tell you the truth? But you see, it'll always prevent any kind of really, really, really close relationship forming, because you're always at the same time maintaining the relationship with lies and also preventing the relationship from getting deeper by the same lies. Because you never are able to tell the truth, you consistently mistrust your spouse or other person in your life. You know, you're mistrusting them. You can't tell them the truth. So, you know, and so they have this delusion about your closeness. You don't feel that close. You know what I mean? And which is also reinforcing the negativity brought about that resulted in you having to lie. I mean, something happened between you, or you've done something, you've transgressed in some way that you wanted to conceal. But you're concealing that, and you're concealing your mistrust in the moment. Like, I'm concealing what I did, and I'm also concealing the fact that I don't trust you with the truth about me. I don't trust you. I don't think you're going to continue to love me. I don't think you're going to forgive me as you ought. I don't think you're going to understand. It's going to be too difficult. And lies seem easy. And they are easy, but they, just like a lot of things, they may be easy, but they do not ease your existence. I mean, they don't provide ease to your life. They make things more difficult. The truth is ultimately simpler. I can testify. You know, that being truthful, it feels good. It feels liberating. It is liberating. The truth shall make you free. He deviseth mischief upon his bed. He setteth himself in a way that is not good. He abhorreth not evil. He doesn't hate evil. I mean, we should have I abhor lying, but thy law do I love. Psalm 119. Excuse me. And I suddenly felt my blood sugar drop too, so I'm glad there's only 10 minutes left, because I'm starting to feel like tired. And also hot. I want to turn this fan on. But I just don't like that, you know. I mean, I don't know, it's alright. Is it that annoying? I'm going to turn it on for the last 10 minutes, forgive me. It might be slightly... I'll just talk closer to the microphone and try to aim it away. That feels much better. Okay, so... You know, the idea that, you know, devising mischief on your bed is a recurring biblical theme. Like, I mean, it's over and over in the Bible. There's always like, the wicked are always in their beds planning and plotting evil. You know what I mean? And what does that say? Why is it always on their beds they're plotting evil? Why not like at the breakfast table or at the board meeting, right? Why is it not at the meeting of the elders? I mean, because those are places evil gets plotted also. But the idea is that because, you know, bed is where you should just, hey, it's for sleeping, right? But they're so full of mischief in their hearts that they can't even sleep for all the thoughts of the mischief they want to do. They lay on their bed devising mischief. I mean, I know, because I've laid in my bed devising things. You know what I mean? Like thinking of things I want to do. I've had to get up in the middle of the night. Sometimes I had to write some lyrics down. You know, I'd get up and be like, I need to write that down. I want to, you know, I'll forget it. I go down and write things down. Sorry. You know, and, you know, the idea that, like, of laying awake in your bed. You know what I mean? It signifies, like, sometimes people lay awake at night worrying about things. How am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to pay the electric? How am I going to pay the phone? How am I going to pay the other bills? How am I going to pay my insurance? How am I going to pay the kids' college? How am I going to pay for their lunch? How am I going to pay for the groceries this month? You know, right? Or maybe it's like, I could pay for the groceries this way. I can do this. It's like, or like, I've got a job. I'm going to build this fence for somebody. It's going to need to be this. I'm going to need concrete. Sometimes your life is so full. Yeah, you take thoughts to bed. But the point of bed is to kind of stop thinking and rest. Close your eyes and go unconscious for a while. Just rest it. Give it a rest. They can't give it a rest. They're so wicked. They can't give it just give it a rest for the night. Just put away your wicked thoughts. Stop devising evil. Just for the night, even. They're so wicked, they can't even rest for their zeal to carry out the wickedness of their heart. And a lot of times they don't even really think of it as wickedness. The wicked don't think they're wicked. In so many ways. I got a new song that's going to be coming out. I keep saying that. I got several news. I keep writing more new songs. And there are very different stages of production. And one of them is about racism and how racism is bad. But the song is meant to be somewhat ironic. Because it's sung, at least at first, in the perspective of someone who is, like a left-wing individual who thinks themselves as an anti-racist. And how they think of themselves as virtuous because they're not racist. Now, the Bible has taught for thousands of years that there's neither Jew nor Greek, nor male nor female in Christ. It is, the sentiments which led to the abolitionist movement were Christian sentiments. But the Bible doesn't lay out abolitionism, per se, in the Bible. But all the people who were abolitionists were highly motivated by biblical thinking. Because the Bible doesn't always, like the right or wrong, it understands that slavery is a tragedy. Joseph was sold into slavery. It was not meant to be like, that's just fine. It was understood to be, being the whole story of the Israelites being brought out of captivity in the slavery narrative. That is so clearly, it's let my people go. The men ought not to be held in bondage, right? But sometimes they are. Sometimes they put themselves in bondage for debts. In the past, we all live in some sort of bondage anyways, right? But it's best when you have at least control of your own basic destiny, meaning, your life from day to day is yours to command. But the song is based on the thought of like someone who's like thinks they are virtuous because they're against racism, right? They have virtue, right? And I talk about, hey, well, what this person who thinks their virtue lies in the fact that they've recognized that racism is bad. When I was growing up, I thought racism was like over. We had Ebony and Ivory. We had We Are the World. We had Michael Jackson was like the biggest pop star in the world. And it just seemed like, everyone's coming along. I didn't realize there's still problems, but the point is, in our hearts, there was no animosity. And my belief was the thing, I grew up believing that was the past, and now we're all going forward in peace and brotherhood. At least that's the goal. I know it's not all let's hold hands and stuff immediately, but I thought we all agreed on the basic rules of the game, meaning, equal protection under the law. That's everybody deserves that. Everyone should be treated fairly and equally by the law. Everyone should have the same opportunities. Not, results may vary. That's always the way life works. Results may vary. Dangerous areas exist. Life has stuff like that. But this character in the song believes they're full of virtue. And so what do? They say, one of the first things it says, well, if I find a racist, I'm going to go tell on him. I'll make sure he never has a job again. I'll make sure they lose their job. And they turn into, and when you consider that who they define as racist just gets broader and broader until it's just people who believe in the Constitution or something like that. People who wave the American flag or whatever. It's like there's, on some level, it becomes this ridiculous caricature. It's like you just hate people that don't have the same opinion as you. And it's really just about hate. You know what I mean? They think they're virtuous. And that's my point about this. They flatter themselves in their own eyes. They say, I'm full of virtue, and I hate racism. I hate it. And I'm going to go do something about it. So somebody over here said something that I don't like. So I'm going to try to destroy their lives. And this is not evil on my part. I'm not being wicked. I'm actually doing the Lord's work. But there is no Lord. And because it is a sort of a religion that they've been talking about, this anti-racism. I'm doing the work of anti-racism. So by destroying people's lives, by ruining their reputations, I'm not being wicked. I'm increasing my own virtue. I'm becoming an even better person. You know, the words of his mouth are iniquity and deceit. He's deceiving themselves. And their iniquity is hateful because, you know, they keep doing this and they think they flatter themselves thinking, we're doing great, we're doing right, we're helping people. We got to burn down the system. Let's go into the black neighborhoods and burn down all the grocery stores. That'll show how anti-racist we are. You know, they flatter themselves. I think, I'm special. I believe the right things. Therefore, when I do this evil thing, it's not evil that I do, because I do it in the name of righteousness. I do it in the name of a righteous cause. Stamping out evil racism. It is perfectly acceptable to do evil to destroy evil. And it doesn't even matter how much evil you do. You know? Racism is such a pox on society that, you know, stamping out every vestige of it. Meaning if you even have a sliver of a racist thought. Like let's say you thought for a second, I want my grandkids to look like me. You know what I mean? To look like, you know what I mean? If you thought that even in your heart for a moment, you know? If you thought about one of your children dating someone of another race and had misgivings, if you ever, you know, if you ever were in contact with a person of another race, and especially a racial minority, and felt uncomfortable for some reason, if you know you're a racist. And the world will not be a good place until all such thinking is purged 100%. And when you get to that point, you start thinking like, hey, it can't be solved till we purge all of this. And then the greatest evil can be conquered. But in the name of conquering evil, it's like with the coronavirus, it's like this white whale quest they go on. You know, they're chasing the one goal. You know, we're going to flatten the curve and stop the virus. In the meantime, we're leaving a trail of human wreckage and devastation. And not even considering like, hey, you know what? Last year, the same number of people who died from the coronavirus died from accidents. And we didn't even care. It happens every year. You know? So every year between 150 and 200,000 people die from preventable accidents. You know? I forgot what year. It was like 169,000 in 2017. Preventable accidents just died. Right? Slipped in the bathtub. Should have been wearing their bike helmet. You know? Got in a car accident. Everyone should drive 30 miles an hour. Why not? Don't you care about saving lives? Speed limit, national speed limit on every road, highway, and dirt track should be 30 miles an hour. Maybe 20. You know, 20 would mean very few fatalities. You know? And do we really need... I mean, are you so selfish? You got to get where you're going in such a hurry that you can't just make a little sacrifice that kids could live. You know, one of the number one causes of death for young people is automobile accidents. So, why don't we make the speed limit 20 miles an hour universally? We will save hundreds of thousands of lives. Millions, over a decade, we will save millions of lives. Millions of young lives snuffed out because we all got to drive 60 miles an hour everywhere we go. And that's even when we're breaking the speed limit. And we don't, and you know, and that happens all the time. And then we come along this coronavirus, flatten the curve. And so I was going to compare that also to this, what I was talking about before. Racism. You know, what happens is we get laser focused on, oh, we want to destroy racism. And what we end up doing is, in the process, destroy all society. A much greater evil. To destroy our legal system, to destroy equal protection under the law, in order to stamp out every vestige of racism. To truly stamp out every vestige of racism. I mean, if you're gonna get so tiny on your definition, if you're not gonna like just use the good old definition of racial superiority or hatred, you know, to me a racist is someone who thinks they're either superior or just hates other races. You can think you're inferior and be a racist about it. I mean, you know, it's not the same. Racism is not equivalent to white supremacy, though white supremacy is a racist ideology. Racism itself could take a lot of forms, but like you think about it, if you look at the smallest form, like where someone could say like, oh, you know, yeah, you had a thought that was like not hip with the whole like kumbaya movement of the day, right? And that, whatever, you know, it's like I have nothing against people marrying who they like and etc. and all that. I don't want to interfere in people's lives. But if you ever had a thought like, you know, I'd like my grandchildren to look like me, you know, it's like, you know, and I would bet people of other races might even want their grandchildren to look like them. You know, who would know? And some people probably don't care and think it's wonderful to mix it up. And you know what? I don't have anything against you. You know what I mean? I mean, because you could also characterize, you could say, well, that's racist. You're not respecting the races. Because some of these people think races should be separated. And I think, you know what? You guys all think way too much about race. Way too much about it. You think about it too much. Think about it too much, man. It's just like the other thing, and you know, and in seeking to destroy it, you would destroy so much else. You know what I mean? And because you're not taking that introspection to see your own iniquity. And instead you just flatter yourself. I'm full of virtue. I'm doing the most important work of all. I'm conquering racism forever. What a moral giant I am. You know? And so then as they are looking up the name of somebody who, you know, like I said, after I did Blame the White, that song, it's like I could see on LinkedIn. I got a lot of more searches since then. People are looking into my name. It's not because of my business. I can tell because it's a bump that I don't usually get from business. Could be unrelated. I don't know. But I certainly look at that. I'm like, because that's what they want to know. Where do you work? Where do you work? Oh, I work at Stringini Brothers. You gonna try to get me fired? Good luck with that. Good luck with that. And the thing is, it's like, I said, if I was to say what I am, well, whatever. I don't like to make any pronouncements. So there we go. Mischief on their bed. And then, so we begin in verse 5 with Thy mercy, O Lord. So that's where we'll begin tomorrow. Thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to being back again tomorrow to continue in the Psalms. And, by the way, just as a note, and let's see, what did I do with this? This is going to make sense in a second. Okay, I had that up all that time. Really, I left it on that. So we didn't have this up. Hilarious. I just realized, like, I'm not, like, I didn't have the words up all that time. How long was that going on for? How long was I in the little window, I wonder? Oh, well. It's only these 4 verses, and hopefully you have a Bible. And that bugs me. Makes me sad. I should have had that scriptures up the whole time. But what I was going to show you real quick here is this. Alright, give it a second here. Okay. Where am I? Okay. Hopefully this works. Let's see. Here we go. Image viewer. This is how we're going to do it with the Psalms. This is a breakdown of how we're going to study the Psalms. And this is out of my companion Bible, but so I talked about the division of the Psalms into several books, and I don't, the Genesis book concerning man. The assessment here. I'm always like, really? I'm like, aren't you overgeneralizing? But the point is, the book of Psalms has been divided since ancient times, I've been told, into these 5 divisions. It's the first one goes 1 through 41. So we're going to break at 41 and go to the New Testament. And then we will go back to the Psalms, then we'll break and go maybe to something else, then we'll break and go something else. And then we'll have the long haul for 107 through 150. But that's how we're going to break up the Psalms according to these books. So that's just FYI. You can see the last one, the Deuteronomy book. So there's 5 divisions of the Psalms. So we will go 1 through 41, and then we will go on to something else for a while, and then come back, and that way we can break up the Psalms so it's not just a Psalm extravaganza. I like saying that. Okay, so sorry about the lack of changing screens back to where we were, and you had to just stare at that Bible Hub screen for so long. But anyways, tomorrow we'll be back and hopefully do a little better job. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you tomorrow.
The bands of the wicked have robbed me, but I have not forgotten thy law. At midnight will I rise to give thanks unto thee because of thy righteous judgments, O Lord. I am a companion of all them that fear thee, and of them that keep thy precepts. The earth, O Lord, is full of thy mercy. Teach me thy statutes. Thou hast dealt well with thy servants, O Lord, according to thy word. Teach me good judgment and knowledge.